Okay, well, welcome everybody to Tech Talk Live 2021, the virtual conference. Welcome to your first afternoon session. With us today, we have Jordan Pusey from Cameo and Rod Russo of the Community High School District 99 in Illinois. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to kick things off talking to you about our experience with Cameo and how it really helped us during the early stages of the pandemic to deliver critical curricular resources to students. Like Brian mentioned, I'm from Community High School District 99. We're just a little west of Chicago, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in the industry for quite a while. I can't even imagine. I don't know where all those years went, but I started out actually in schools as a night computer operator at a high school district about an hour north of here, right when they literally transitioned from punch cards, bringing their first computer system in place. Taught myself COBOL at the time and really got immersed in technology and got to know the people that developed the administrative software that we were using. So hired on with them in '78 as their 7th employee. And over the years, we grew to actually, we had customers, school districts in about 35 states, and spent a lot of time traveling to those states, installing, demonstrating, designing, programming the software. And eventually, through all the corporate exchanges and everything, I realized I'd spent all that time working in schools. It was time to go work for a school again. So switched over to Lyons Township, initially as the data processing director. And that was right when technology was kind of becoming a thing in schools, where schools were starting to form actually people like a role to manage tech. So did that for a year, and then due to a retirement and some restructuring here at District 99, back in '96, actually, the superintendent then had the foresight to create this comprehensive director position, a cabinet level position. There weren't many directors of tech at that point that were part of the superintendent's cabinet. So I was fortunate to get in about 25 years ago, actually, in that role. So, and like I said, we're about an hour west of Chicago. And for anyone who's not familiar with the state of Illinois, we're a little bit unique, I guess, in terms of the way we do school districts here. We have some districts that are literally unit districts, K to 12, some smaller, some quite large. And we also have districts that only have K-8 students and districts like ours that only have high school students. We literally have 5 or 6 separate K-8 districts that feed students into us, which makes articulation of many things tough, but it's just kind of the way it works. We've been a Google Apps district since 2012, so almost 10 years. And back in 2015, we were fortunate enough to go fully one-to-one at that time. We literally pulled the switch one year and went from no Chromebooks to full one-to-one for all of our students. So that's kind of a little bit about us. I like to show this slide. This actually is a slide that's depicting, for my time here, so for the past 25 years, the amount of bandwidth that we provide to the internet. And as you can see, for many years, as we started out with a T1 line and then added a few more and on, it was quite flat for a long time. And literally the last 5 years, exponential isn't even a strong enough word to describe it. Not only is this is a depiction of our bandwidth that we provide, I really think it's also a depiction of just the immense reliance on technology. The expectation is just so, I've always joked to some of our network staff that, we're a 911 call center, and it really feels more and more that we are that way, where if if something is inaccessible for a very short amount of time, it has a critical impact. There's just this expectation now that, just like light switches, you just walk in a room and you expect it to turn on. It's not like technology used to be like my car when I was a kid. When I was a kid, my cars, I always had a toolbox in the back because I never knew if it was going to start or not. Now I get in my car and I push the button and it never even crosses my mind it isn't going to start. So that's kind of the world that we're in now. And as I shared, I've been around a while in this field, and those are actually that's a Burroughs mainframe that I worked on in the early years. Burroughs terminals there that used to sit on my desk, and this is the epitome of mainframe computing with dumb terminals on the desk, a wire that somehow connects them to the mainframe, and then all of the computing power exists at that level. And it amazes me in the early years, just when I worked at the Glenbrook School District, the computer that we had running both the student information and the financial information systems had 96K of RAM, and the disk drive was a 40 megabyte drive. And this is a district of about 5,000 students. It's amazing. But because of that, because of my experience in mainframes, fast forward to my time, even in my early years here at District 99, I've always, anytime there were demonstrations or information that came out about Citrix and other solutions like that, I was immediately gravitated toward them because it's so much like my mainframe experience that I had. That concept of, you're not investing a lot of money and resources and technology in the endpoint that the end user is touching. You're putting that investment in the central um, power, where the central computing power, where that is all done. So I totally understood the technology. I love the technology. It makes a lot of sense. But invariably, every few years that I looked at it, I just could not make a good use case for it. Again, this was before cloud-based technologies were really as prevalent as they are now, or even out there much at all, accessible by us anyway. It was before virtual servers and that whole world was really there. So to implement a solution like this, it was costly and complex, and just couldn't find the fit for it. But nonetheless, it's always been in my mind, this I'm a mainframe guy at heart. This makes sense to me. Well, and then COVID happened. And we all know that when COVID happened, we basically, as the little sign I stuck in there depicts, we all just immediately started going off road. We were in schools and in everywhere. Every day we literally had administrative meetings every day, and it seems like every day for many, many months there was just a new challenge. Things kept popping up that we had to solve, and I know all of you experienced the exact same thing. We did think, though, that because we were lucky enough to already be one-to-one with Chromebooks, that for our students, using the Google tools, so many online resources that teachers were already using with students, said, "Oh, we got this. We're in great shape," which we were for the most part. I feel really blessed that we were at that place. I know many other districts struggled with not being one-to-one at all yet, or maybe only a portion of their students were. So there was just so many additional struggles that they went through just to get to that point where students could have some level of access at home. But just when we, at least for that piece of it, that we thought we were doing pretty well, in some of our daily administrative meetings, concerns started popping up about, well, what about our students that are taking AutoCAD? And what about our students that are in this Windows lab that we have in the schools for that? even though we're one-to-one with Chromebooks, and we really got rid of a lot of the dedicated labs that we used to have in the buildings. There was just some curricular software that just really required those Windows resources in order for students to do the curriculum level work that they needed. And some of those things for us in the high school setting were just a lot of things around digital photography and music, all the engineering and architectural things, some of the AP classes, some of the programming classes. There were just some tools there. Early on, teachers, realizing they had this problem, got really creative with finding all kinds of free resources online to try to fill the gap in their curriculum. Ultimately, though, while it allowed them to do a little bit with the students, it really, for most of the classes, they really needed some of those tools that I have listed at the right there. There were just so many of those tools that, just from an instructional standpoint, that was what the class was based around, and they really needed that. So we were kind of stuck, and just started to brainstorm and think of solutions. And luckily, we have a really good relationship with Amplified IT. Most of you probably know of Amplified IT. If you don't, they're a company that basically is totally centered around Google and providing Google support and services to schools. And they've just grown exponentially over the past years and recently acquired by CDW, actually. We've had a good relationship with them over the years, and several times actually over the past 4 or 5 years, they've asked us for our opinion on some partners that they were looking at, different solutions that they had found. And we actually, over the years with them, we looked at one or two Cameo-like services that they had found. And again, my interest perked up, mainframe guy. But uh, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, Cameo was one that Keegan over at Amplified shared with us. And I think Jordan may have been on a couple of those calls with us early on, where we didn't actually run a pilot of Cameo, but we dove into significant depth where we really got a good understanding of it, and we're really intrigued. So naturally, when this problem came about, we worked back through Amplified and got in touch with Jordan and Cameo. And some of the things that we really were reminded of, and that actually our implementation of Cameo really proved, was that truly this is a browser-based access tool in terms of it's a virtual desktop where you just need a device with a browser. So our Chromebooks, whether we were running AutoCAD or whether we were running a simple application, either one of them, the Chromebook had adequate resources in its browser to take care of that. We were we were amazed and pleased at how easy and simple it was to set up a proof of concept and just really set up the system through just a simple call with Cameo. With Cameo, we spun up an instance on their end. We installed an application on our end that we needed to support and provided access to that. Very simple and easy to set up. I'm really I'm pleased with the level of security in their environment. Obviously, with all the cloud-based resources out there these days, we really need to be cognizant of that. And I'm pleased with how their environment is secured, only allowing and ensuring that that access is designed and maintained for who needs it and for what reason. some of the applications that we have to support in this environment, some of them are simple little applications that don't require a lot of computing power. Some of them, some of the Adobe applications, the AutoCAD applications, for example, require a tremendous amount of computing power. They're the ones that in our labs, in our CAD lab in our school, we refresh those computers pretty often, and they're pretty beefy devices that we hand down to other places in the school. And what Cameo does is, number one, there's different servers on the back end that, based on the application that you're needing to support, if you need something that really is heavily graphics oriented and really requires, an extreme amount of processing power, there's servers that they dedicate to that so that those applications get the service that they need. And the other thing that helps with that is, especially early on, as again, we were just overnight just trying to make these decisions in this transition, the way their backend server environment is set up is it's really an elastic environment where it was very seamless and easy. If for whatever reason the next day we had many more students hop on than were on the day before, and as we were trying to get a sense for where was our sweet spot in terms of what resources did we need, the Cameo backend really has that elasticity where it can apply additional server resources quickly and readily to meet that need. And when it comes to Google integration, I put that on the list because one of the things that we were worried about and weren't quite sure how to handle initially was file storage. When you're in a computer lab, a Windows computer lab in a school, you've got network drives, you've got network storage, so you're opening and saving files to a dedicated space within that network drive. Well, all of our students have Google Drives as well. And through Cameo's integration through the applications and with Google, that process really becomes pretty seamless with the Google Drive acting as, when a student goes to save their work or open that work. So not only some of the other parts of Google, but that part of saving and accessing the student's work is really a key that we found there that we weren't quite sure how that was going to be addressed. And finally, I'll just say that as simple and easy as it was to set up and keep running, we've found the support to just be excellent as well. Whenever we do have a question or an issue, they're very easy to reach, and the support has been great. So that's kind of my kind of story a little bit in terms of where we started, what pointed us in this direction, and what we've found so far. And then we're going to turn it over to Jordan, who's really the expert and can give us a walkthrough and a demo.
Hey, thanks, Rod. Hey, one of the things that you'll notice about me is that I want to make this session as interactive as possible. So if you do have questions, either for Rod or myself, please put those in the chat. We'll open it up again for Q&A at the end. So if you can also unmute your lines during that time to be able to ask us questions. We'd love to answer those questions. So Rod, really quick, can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So this is Cameo. I'm going to give a quick demo of Cameo. So Rod mentioned a bunch of stuff that really helped his school district. The first thing that he mentioned is that we are all based in the cloud. So when we designed Cameo, we wanted to make sure that you stayed in the cloud. And that could be public or private cloud. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in a minute. But we are all based in the cloud. So everything that you do here is all done through a HTML5 web browser. And that means that you can support any device that you have. So if you have Chromebook, if you have iPad, if you have Mac or PC, all of those devices we can support. These are all Windows applications, things that you can support from any of those devices. All of these applications run in the cloud. So all the compute happens in our data center. and you're able to access these applications. And then we also, Rod mentioned security. So all the things you do here are done behind authentication. We use HTTPS to be able to encrypt the data stream. All of those things are part of it. But really what we did is we focused on ease of use, making sure that you can get Windows applications to a web browser very quickly. So the first part of this, I'm going to show end user aspect of this. And then the second part, we're going to show the back end and how you can set up applications for yourself. So you'll see I've got this in a web browser. These are all applications that I've installed myself. So Cameo comes as a clean slate. You would install your own Windows applications and publish them. And so you'll see I've got a bunch of these that are pretty common. And I think, Rod, you mentioned a few of these. So AutoCAD, Photoshop, Illustrator, Microsoft Office is pretty popular. I'm going to use Microsoft Office as my demonstration app. But you'll see that I've also got, Photoshop and AutoCAD and some other things up here and available so that we can take a look at them as part of this demo. So the first thing you'll notice is that I have a nice portal. This portal is something that you can give to your students and teachers so that they're able to access applications. In my case, I'm an administrator. So when I click on the application, if I was a user, I would go right into that application in a web browser. But in this case, I have administrative rights, so I get additional options. Up here at the top, and I'll right click and highlight that for you, is a link. That link is a unique URL that you can use for your application. You can either use the portal that we just saw, or you can use that link to be able to put that into your own portal and access that application directly. So in this case, I could copy this link and paste it in a new browser. In this case, I'm just going to hit the play button and it will open up that link in a new browser. Okay, so once I open up that link in a new browser window, in a new browser tab, you'll see that I will get access to this full version of Microsoft Office. And this full version of Microsoft Office is a Windows version so that you can do everything. There's no limitations, there's no features that are missing and so forth. This is the full version of Microsoft Office. And I can start to interact directly with this application. So for instance, you could say I got a typo in here. So if I want to do some formatting, all the things that you would expect in an application, I'm actually going to do a little bit of copy and paste. So here's some keyboard commands. All the things that you would expect to do in an application you can do. So Rod, you also mentioned integration into Google. So if I want to save this document, I'd hit File and Save As. I'd hit Browse. This is where the Cameo magic comes into play. I now have access to my Google Drive. We'd also give you access to Teams or shared drives. And then you also have the option to use OneDrive or Dropbox if you like. So there's lots of different options to be able to save documents in their native format. So in this case, I'm just going to hit Save. It'll save that directly to Google Drive. Same if I want to open a document, I can go find the document. It'll enumerate all the files there on the Google Drive, and then I can go ahead and find a document, go ahead and open it. So some easy ways for you to save documents and so forth. And then once that document's open, I can go ahead and edit it and then save it and so forth. Now, the other thing too here is that you can set up interaction with the local device. So if there is a file or something that you want to support on your local device here, I'm going to go ahead and hit Browse. I can use what we call a drag and drop feature. And what the drag and drop feature will do is that I can find a file on my local system and I can just simply drag and drop it into the box. And once I do that, it will upload it. So you can see the file transfer down here at the bottom, and then we'll open that document in its native format. So easy ways for you to interact with the local device itself. We also have a file download. So if they want to hit File and Save, Save As, for instance, and I hit Browse, it'll give me a download option here too. And once I do that, it will use the browser's native mechanisms to download that in its native format so that I can save that on my local computer. So you can see there it goes. I can go ahead and save that, show it in my Finder, save it as I need. Okay. And then one last thing from the end user perspective, and then we'll move on to how to install an application, is that I can also print from here as well. So you'll see that we have what we call the Cameo virtual printer driver. When I hit print, it'll open up a native dialog box in my browser, and I can select a local printer driver. and then go ahead and hit print from here. I'm not going to because anyway, I don't want an additional paper off my own printer, but you can see how easy and flexible it is to be able to use applications from within Cameo. Again, these are all done within a browser. So everything that you see here can be done on Chromebook. It can be done on an iPad. You'll see there's some additional options here. If you want to support an Android device, for instance, there's an on-screen keyboard. If you want to support additional resolution, I can go full screen, for instance. So lots of different options for you to be able to interact with that application. Okay, so back to here. So I'm going to take off my hat that was my end user's hat, and I'm going to put on my administration hat. So what I need to do is I need to install these applications. So if you've got your copy of Illustrator, or if you've got your copy of AutoCAD or whatever, I'll need to install those applications. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I need to create a server. And I'm going to connect to that server as an admin. But before I create that server, I want to talk a little bit about hosting options. So if I click add down here, for instance, you'll see that you can host it from one of our servers. That's our fully hosted option. So this is our cloud server option. This actually is hosted in the Google Cloud platform. So every server that you see in that list was all hosted in the Google Cloud platform. You can see there's a big button here. It would say create a server. You would be able to choose a data center. Probably you'd want to choose the East Coast data center and then create that server. You can see that I've already created it, so I don't get the option to create the server. I want to pause here for just a minute and let's talk about the self-hosted option. The self-hosted option means that you can host Cameo from a data center of your choice. And that means that you can simply pick a data center. So if you've got an on-site data center, you're welcome to do it. Or if you've got your own cloud data center. So if you have your own instance of Google Cloud Platform, if you want to host it from AWS, if you want to host it from Azure or whatever cloud data center that you have available, a colo or whatever, we can do that. I won't go into great detail on the self-hosted, but that option is available to you. And you'll see the different pricing options through IU13. So you're welcome. I'll show you a slide here. You're welcome to get with Jessica Diller. She can go through the pricing options for you. We've come up with some amazing deals, based on your needs and priorities and through the IU13. So that's actually a good way for you to purchase Cameo if you're interested. Okay. And you're welcome. You're also welcome to, ask me additional questions and so forth about that. So back here, so a question, Rod, that came through. Are you self-hosted or are you using the cloud?
We are cloud hosted.
Yeah, so you're fully cloud hosted, and I actually have your instance up if you're okay with me showing it. That we'll go through and show a few things. Okay, so what you do once you create those servers, you can see that I've got a server created. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to use a different one, but we can also create additional servers based on who you are. So the first thing I'm going to do here is like I mentioned, over here on the right, I'm going to go connect as an admin. And when I connect as an admin, it will pull up a tab and you'll see that I will get full access to the desktop as an administrator. And that means that I can have the option to install software. And you'll just do it just like you see on the screen here. Somehow it resized my screen, I apologize. But just how you see on the screen here, you can do it 1, 2, 3. The first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to be able to get that software package to this server. And that just simply means that you need to, you can drag and drop it in this box, or you need to go directly to the vendor website to be able to get and install the software. Step 2, just install the software. It's as easy as that, right? So what you would do is you would just run that EXE or MSI. And then step 3 over here on the right-hand side, you'll see that application appear in this box under recently installed. I'm getting some action here. And then once that is installed, then you would just simply check the box to publish your software to users. So I'm going to do a quick example here. We'll open a browser. We'll go to the vendor's website. I'm going to go to Notepad++, for instance. An easy application that we can use for demonstration's sake. I'm going to go find their download file. You'll see I've got one here. And then once that downloads, I think I just hit close, there we go. Once that downloads, I just simply run the installer. and do the click through like I normally would. So English, accept the license agreement. Okay, this is going to happen really quick. So you'll see that that installed very quickly. But if you have a larger package, obviously, you're going to need to install that. Now, from an administrator perspective here, you have the option to run the application. So if you need to make changes, if you need to add additional information, if you need to license the application, you can do that from here. In this case, I do not. So I'm going to go ahead and close the app, and then I'm going to go find it in my list. You'll see I now have Notepad++ checked. I hit apply, and then that will publish my application, and now it is ready to use. So I go back to my applications here, Notepad++ shows up. I click on the Notepad++. Again, it has that unique URL. If I want to show it in the Cameo portal down here, I'd click on this and say show in portal. And then I can go ahead and hit play. Before I get to the actually showing you the application too, I want to talk about restrictions. So we talked about that security. So applications, we can lock down so that only students or teachers that need access to that can get access to that. In this case, we can use either Cameo itself to lock those groups down, or we can import Google Groups to be able to lock down those as well and set up restrictions. So lots of different ways that we can do that. You'll notice that when I did run this application here, for instance, I now, if I want to save this document, for instance, we've automatically replaced that dialog, and now you can save directly to the Google Drive directly. Okay, so I've told you how to install applications. I'm going to go back here a little bit and talk a little bit more about the servers. So when you might ask, how many, if you only get one server, can you possibly host, hundreds of students and so forth? The answer is that we create what we call elastic clusters. And so we handle all of the load balancing and through this elastic clusters. So if you have capacity planning or load balancing, basically what it is, we'll get users onto a single server. So we share resources. And then once we reach certain capacities, we can enable what we call elastic clusters. And that simply means that we'll create additional resources to be able to handle the load. So if you've got hundreds of users, actually we have customers that literally have hundreds of users, simultaneous users, or thousands of users, or tens of thousands of users. And we would just simply create resources in those data centers to be able to handle that load and that peak capacity. So a couple things I want to point out. If you go back to my application list here, you'll notice there's some key apps here that we've seen pretty consistently throughout a lot of different school districts and so forth. So Microsoft Office, Photoshop, Illustrator, a lot of the Autodesk titles, including AutoCAD, Revit, 365. I do want to show CSD 99 here. So what we did to keep the expenses down is that we broke out the applications that needed a GPU. So you can see this list of applications that they have that need a GPU, including some of these AutoCAD applications. So you can see, for instance, 3ds Max is very popular. You can see they also have Revit and Inventor that gets used quite a bit. So something that is very popular. And then on their other server here, they have some Visual Studios. This is ones without a GPU. So they have Visual Studio, a lot of the Photoshops and Illustrators and so forth. So you can see the different types of applications that school districts are using and are pretty consistent. Now, the other thing too is we've also got like some Visual Studios in here. So if you've got classes that are, engineering classes or software development classes, we can support those Windows applications to make sure that your students can, get through the semester. And the other thing that is really cool about Cameo is just the flexibility of it. They can run it on the device that they have in their hand. Not to mention they can do their homework at night. They don't have to join a lab or come into a lab physically. They can do that from the device, like I said, they have in their hand. Whew, okay, that was a lot. I do want to point out here's an instance of AutoCAD running inside of Cameo. So if you do have questions about this, unfortunately, I'm a little unfamiliar with how it works. So you'll have to, if you want to play with it and so forth, you're welcome for me to set you up a demo and a trial, and you're welcome to go through that trial and look at all these different functions and capabilities and so forth yourself. and do some testing to see if that's going to work for you. But you can see, this is Photoshop, for instance. You can see that it is pretty reactive and so forth, and very easy to use inside of the web browser. Okay, so a bunch of questions popped up. Why don't we, Rob, do you mind just,
Yep.
Rob, just pulling up that slide deck again?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I saw some in the chat, Jordan. I was waiting until you were done, and then we can get at those.
Yeah, so let me read through these, Rod. It says, do you have any licensing issues? I'm assuming that's licenses for the software themselves.
Right, and we really didn't. I know that was an initial concern, but based around how we were able to control the students that had access, and total transparency, just like this year has been one giant fog. My mind is a little foggy on that right now, so you may be able to help Jordan with the next question. Like, I know we're using Google Groups actually to manage who has access to which applications.
Yeah, so again, we can look at those Google Groups. It makes it easy for you to say, set up a group for a particular class or a set of classes. And so when the student joins those classes, they automatically get access to applications. That's actually a cool feature. The other thing that we've done too is that you can incorporate it into your own portal. So if you've got like a school tool or oh shoot, I'm spacing on the names, but all the different names of those school portals, you would just simply post the link there, and then the students would get access to applications as they come into the classes or as they access the portal. So licensing of the applications, just a really quick one too on that, is that the applications do consume a license. So that is a per vendor question that you would have to have. The good news is that Autodesk is very generous with their licensing, so we don't have any issues with them. Adobe has switched to a user license, so they can compensate for a virtual model as well. And then, of course, Microsoft knows about virtualization. So the good news is most vendors are very considerate of a virtual license. So if you have any questions on particular applications and so forth, I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more. Rod, do you mind just going to the next slide real quick? This is my account. This is my information here. You're welcome to contact either us or IU13 should you choose to be interested in Cameo. So there's my direct contact information. You're welcome to send me an email. I'd be happy to set you up. Also, Jessica Diller has been working with us for the statewide purchase program that you have available through IU13. That means you do get discounts. I did notice there was a question about Cameo and how we do licensing and so forth. Our posted pricing is based on a named user. However, we have negotiated a concurrent user through IU13. So make sure you check with Jessica. She's got some great pricing for you guys.
And I think, Jordan, there were a couple other questions out there that maybe you would be best to answer. How are you different than AWS? I assume that's referring to the tools and facilities that AWS is now offering along the same lines.
Yeah, so AWS does have a couple of different options, one of them being an AppStream option. The difference between us is the flexibility and the growth. You'll see our tool is going to be much easier to use. We have a predictive pricing model, so we base our prices based on a concurrent user, like you mentioned. So that is very good for school budgets where you can plan ahead. So I'll work with you, and Jessica will work with you to understand the pricing better, so that we can work ahead with you. Plus, a lot of things with AWS, they're a bigger company. I think Rod, you mentioned how good Cameo's support was. So if you do run into issues or you do have questions or need help with configurations, those are all things that we'd be happy to help you with.
And Jordan, there was a question out there about ClassLink as well, and it probably has to do with like what we're using for management is Google Groups in terms of who has access. I'm guessing that's maybe an extension of that question.
Yeah, again, what we would do is we would say you go use those individual links to the applications. So you could basically include that, I think, in a class link, but that's one that we definitely have to do some research and help you with. But something that should be pretty easy and straightforward to be able to give you access based on who the students are. We do work with many SSOs. We'd also work with a lot of the different, like I said, what do you call them? School management software or student management software.
Like Schoology
So Kathy,
and Canvas
Schoology,
and
yeah.
type tools.
Yeah, the other cool thing is if you've got like Canvas or some, other type of LMS system, is that the teachers can embed those links directly into the lessons. So they could say, click this link to get the app, click this link to get the documents for it, and you'd just be able to pop that all up in a browser. So there's actually some cool things you could do with Cameo.
Cool.
So it's not just for Chromebooks, that's exactly right. It can be for, whatever systems that you have, basically anything with a browser. So if you've got, like you said, older Macs, if you've got older PCs that you want to maybe convert over to like a Chromebook type experience, there's a couple of vendors out there that do it. I believe Cloud Ready is a good solution for that. There's also some easy ways for you to access it directly with the PC. You'll notice, I don't know if you noticed, but I was on a Mac. So that is something that's easy to access, just whatever device the student has in hand. And that also means that they can do it from home as well. So if you've got, if you've got somebody accessing it from a home PC or from, a home device, and they need to get access to their homework, that's also something that they could do with their own devices as well. So you can support that BYOD initiative. I don't know if you have many of those inside of education, but you could support that. Okay, Streamlabs, CPlug devices. Amanda, we'll get back to your question in just a second. So, Rod, do you want to finish up with your part, and then we can kind of go to more of a Q&A session?
Of course. Yeah, just one little last piece from me here to wrap it up a little bit. We're all wondering what the future is going to look like. I know we're just trying to get through this month, really. But when we start to think about what is August going to look like, we really don't know. So we're trying to build all kinds of scenarios and plans, but we're still making it up as we go a little bit. But I think what we have learned through this past year, and what we do know, is that using a tool like this and just the way we've kind of turned into this remote world where that's just overnight became a reality. And Cameo has kind of enabled us to take those resources that were previously only available when students were sitting in a chair in a Windows lab to their Chromebooks, wherever it was. There's a pretty good chance that we're going to be able to whittle down those Windows labs even more. Even if we don't change anything about how instruction in those areas happens in school, I'm really excited that this opens up learning opportunities for those kids in those classes. For a student in an English class or a history class, they were able to sit in study hall or go home and virtually have access to all their resources, all their assignments, and really everything. For a student in an AutoCAD class, they had their hour that they were in the lab, but then basically they waited until the next day. So really excited about that. This gives them an opportunity that we can give them access to those resources and those materials anytime and anywhere else. We've toyed for many years with giving staff Chromebooks instead of the Windows laptops. Our superintendent actually is a huge Google person, and he's been on a Chromebook for 4 years now. That's all he uses, but he's the exception and not the rule. But with a tool like this, that perhaps opens the door a little bit more for us when that refresh cycle comes up the next time, to really think about that as a viable option for those handful of Windows applications that staff still really need and rely on, to really take a look at that and see if that's a viable option. And I think just all this folds into just our continued need to grow and change and be ready for whatever comes next. At least I feel like we can really leverage our Chromebooks fully now for those resources that kids need. So it really gives us kind of that ability to grow and change a little bit more. So for my part, thank you so much for having us today. And you know, we've got a lot of time left. So as Jordan said, please, any other questions, any other conversations that we want to have, be great.
So Rod, I have a quick question for you. I know you said you look into the future and so forth. Do you see, I mean, is this kind of changing some of the ways that we see people, using technology in schools, and do we see some changes as to, is this more of a hybrid approach that we're going to see in the future? Are we going to see some more, school closures and things that are happening, and kind of what do you see in education in general as far as some of this hybrid learning that's going to be happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the board. I'm sure anybody on this meeting can speak to this. It's whether it's education or the workforce, it's kind of, we've kind of become remote savvy overnight. And we had some instances this spring where there was something going on in the district. There was, I can't remember what it was, if it was questionable weather or whatever, where typically we wouldn't have closed before, but it was a relatively easy decision. So tomorrow is not a closed day, it's not a snow day, it's a remote learning day. So it definitely has opened that up as just a viable option. What I don't know is I don't know what the fall is going to look like, if a majority of students are going to be back, or based on all the different health department guidelines that we kind of have to try to understand and follow, expected to be back. Will there still be a small percentage of students that won't be for medical or other reasons? So this will still play a big part in that. But certainly our world is forever changed, I think, in terms of the fact that that remote learning is a thing now. For as slow as education changes, it's amazing to me how quickly we had to change, and we did change.
Good. So Rod, here's a couple of questions that are coming in. So what are some of the challenges you hit when you first put Cameo into place?
I think initially, quite honestly, it was a challenge to just get a good, accurate list of all the different applications that we needed to support. We knew that we had a lab for this subject and that subject, but it was quite a process to go through and get a sense for who used what application in what classes. And then once we got that identified, even sometimes making sure that we had the right versions to get them installed. And honestly, we did have it more of a Google issue, I guess, than a Cameo issue. We tried to, using Google Groups, we actually tried to do some nesting of groups to make that easier to manage who had access, having a common group and then nesting groups under that. We just had some problems with trying to get that implemented. And it took a little while to, the elasticity of the servers that I mentioned saved us many times, because initially it was like a roller coaster trying to get a good sense. You've got this many students enrolled in a class, and that this class meets at a certain time, and students can now work on this outside of class hours, to try to get a good sense for what our resource demand was like. That was a process that kind of took some time as well.
Okay, very cool. So
can I hit in with a follow-up question on that?
Sure.
Sure.
You said that the applications were available for the students at any time. I dabbled in AWS last year, and they sold it to me in one of two flavors, either always on, which was very expensive, where a student can launch the app whenever they want it, or kind of like scheduled or CPU cycles they charged us on. And it became cost prohibitive. I couldn't afford always on. So in your service, is it always on, or is that a choice there too?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we do is we do economy of scale. And then we also do, we set it up so that if there isn't in any activity time, that those servers are automatically put into what we call a hibernation mode. That doesn't mean they're inaccessible. It means that they will just be an extra 60 seconds or so for that server to warm up for people to get access. So literally you could have students that are interested would be able to hit those servers. They would get access to their applications. The first person that would hit it would just simply get an extra 60 seconds of display screen, if you will. And so that's something that we can go through with you as part of the trial. It just makes it easier for us to, instead of charging you per compute cycle or charging you in arrears, we have a pretty good predictive model to understand, what that's going to look like in your organization, so that we can charge you ahead of time per concurrent user. So that's why people really like Cameo, is that predictive pricing. You don't have to worry about not having enough resources or not having enough time for a service like AWS. We've built that into our pricing model.
Jordan, there was a question referencing Parallels RAS.
Parallels.
I'm not sure
Yeah,
what that is, but
I'll get to that one.
You do.
Yeah, so Parallels is a similar service. What happens is that a lot of times it's self-hosted. They will spin up basically a parallel session or a virtual session, and then share that with your users. That is, in some sense, that is similar to what we're doing, but very different the way that they're handling it. The other thing is that Parallels has multiple products to be able to support Chromebooks, so they do have some compute on the Chromebook itself. The difference for us is that we are all cloud-based. So once you do set that up, either in our cloud or as a self-hosted server, you don't have to worry about the additional management of it. We've made it very easy for people to get access to applications. We've made it very easy for people to set up applications. So to slipstream, that happens very quickly. And Rod, you'll attest to this. We literally had your first applications up in a couple hours, if I remember right.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was super fast.
Yeah, and that was that actually not only did that happen in a couple of hours, I think the thing that took the longest was just to get the PO from you guys.
Yeah.
So it happens very quickly, and you can see from the demo, I was able to set up my first application in less than 10 minutes. So that's something that makes us and stands us apart, is again that ease of use, the security, the fact that we're all cloud-based. Those are the things that really kind of stand us apart.
And there was a question that came in, and I mean, I can answer based on our experience, and then Jordan, you may be able to give some facts. But the fact and based on our experiences, we actually did a wireless infrastructure upgrade fairly recently. But even with that, we were concerned. We had the same concern that was kind of mentioned here, but based on the information that we had and the tests that we ran and our actual experience, we really didn't have any issues with the bandwidth requirements at all.
Yeah, we're very efficient with the bandwidth. So bandwidth has generally not been a factor. We have some customers that are, obviously these are production or productivity apps as opposed to AutoCAD, but we do have customers that are using it on some pretty sketchy networks. Obviously, you're going to get a better experience with higher connection bandwidth, higher bandwidth type connection. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy again to run the trial. You can take a look at it and see what your testing comes through, and we'd be happy to look and see if there's any issues with that. Really quick, Rod, it looks like one I passed up, and I apologize, is
Sure.
Amanda back here asked about streamed apps and Xcode and so forth. Keep in mind that all the compute happens in the back end. At this point, we're only supporting Windows applications. for those applications that we're on. So we won't be able to support Mac apps. We won't be able to support Linux apps and so forth. This is Windows only. We're really looking at those last mile window applications that you need to support inside of an educational organization. So if you're looking at something a little bit more complex like Xcode and so forth, get with me. I'd be happy to talk with you in more detail about some potentials or some options that we may have. Okay, what are the percentage of concurrent users to an application like AutoCAD? Oh, the other thing I mentioned, somebody else asked the question too, and I'll get to, Keith, I'll get to your question in just a minute, but how do you handle users? We do use Windows sessions. We do have some virtualization in place on that. So we do, basically, it's a temporary user profile. And when the user logs off, that profile gets reset back to the beginning. So you do start stateless, with the caveat that we do have some data persistence technologies in place, so that they can carry those over between sessions. But what that does is it just keeps it really easy for you to not have to worry about cluttering sessions or kids getting messed up with corrupting files and so forth. That's all stuff that we've taken care of and makes it very easy. And then the other question is percentage of concurrent users per application. It really varies, but we've built that into our pricing model. So you'll see that when we get into some AutoCADs and some of the more complex graphics driven applications, that is going to be more expensive. It'll have to use what we call our GPU processor. So you'll see that in the pricing that we've separated that out. The good news is that things like Photoshop and so forth, does not need a GPU, so you can take a look at that. And the nice thing about that is that we can get a number of users per machine. We will work with you to make sure that your users have the best experience. And because we can do that elastic clusters, we can just add resources as necessary. So that's all built into what we've done and built in again to the pricing. Oh, wow. Do you have apps that access USB ports? We do have apps that access USB ports. There is a complexity to that answer. Right now, from a Chromebook, we currently do not support USB ports, other than they can store files on them and then drag and drop them into Google Drive. So if you're looking at USB printers and so forth, we have other options for that. Please get in contact with me. I can give you more detail and other options as to how we can support those. If you close the app, how does the system know they're off? We just do. That's something you'll have to ask one of our developers, but basically it resets the session when you close it. We do have some connection resiliency built in, so if the internet connection is interrupted or they accidentally surf away from the page, they can come back where they left off so that they don't lose work. So that's actually some cool technologies as well. And then do the end user sessions of if they are inactive or disconnected from a session state. I think I just answered that. So, all right. Yeah, we're up to our time. Any last minute questions before we log off or sign off? Hey, Brian, do you want to jump in and close it up?
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending the session. A reminder to go visit the sponsors. There's information there, and you can get your word for the phrase to be used at the virtual event tomorrow. And we'll see you on the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.